I want to tell you about this woman. I'll call her Melissa. She was a senior professional earning $115,000 a year. She knew she was underpaid, but it was abstract. It was a feeling. It was a suspicion. She'd been told she was valued. What she had not been given was the salary that matched some of that escalation. And then she sat down and looked at the numbers, comparable roles, her market, her city, 155. She was making 115. She did the math. That's pretty easy. $40,000 a year, $400,000 over 10 years, $800,000 over 20 years. Gone. Not spent, not invested, just left on the table because the conversation never happened. Your leadership knows it. She'll never go anywhere. There's no risk of her leaving. Deep down, you're wondering if you really are capable of carrying that off. The gap is not your failure. It is a fact. Facts can change with a conversation.
Enough already! You've worked harder, stayed later, smiled through it, you've shrunk yourself, you've overexplained yourself, you've apologized for yourself, and still walked away feeling like you were the problem. You weren't. You've been playing by rules that were never designed for you, and you're exhausted. You're done. I'm Coach Mo Fall, and this is Enough Already, the podcast for women who are done performing and ready to heal, reclaim, and redefine what their life actually gets to look like when you step into your real power. No more shrinking, no more trying to be less or more, or whatever they need you to be. We're going to name exactly what happened, get free from it, and figure out what comes next. This is your space. This is your moment. Women, we are rising. Let's get into it.
She knew she was underpaid, and she had known it for years. But it was abstract. It was a feeling. It was a suspicion. And sometimes she felt like, well, maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm making too much of this. Maybe I'm asking for too much. I don't want to be greedy. And then she sat down and looked at the numbers, comparable, right? Her roles, her market, her city, 155. She was making 115. She did the math. That's pretty easy. $40,000 a year. For how many years? 10 more? 400,000. 20 more? $800,000 of missed earnings. And that's not even with the escalators that a decent performer would get. And that is not a pay gap. It's a wealth gap. And today we're going to look at it together, all of it, because you cannot fight a number that you've never faced. So I want to tell you about this woman. I'll call her Melissa. She was a senior professional earning $115,000 a year. She had been at her company for several years. She was good at her job, genuinely good, the kind that her colleagues knew what her strengths and what she brought to the table. Her clients knew. And honestly, her leadership knew as well. She'd been told she was valued. She had received solid performance reviews and had been given more responsibility steadily over time. What she had not been given was the salary that matched some of that escalation. And Melissa knew it in the way a lot of professional women know things, in her gut, in the quiet, in the moments after a meeting when something didn't sit right. She knew she was underpaid. But knowing it in your gut and knowing it as a fact are two different things. And as long as it stayed in her gut, she could manage it. Have you ever done that? You keep something pushed down so that you can live your life around it. She could tell herself she wasn't sure. She could tell herself that the market was complicated. All of the talk track of pushing it down because she wasn't sure. And when she sat down and looked at the numbers, again, roles in her field, levels experience, her market, her industry, her city, the numbers were not hidden. They were in salary surveys, LinkedIn data, job postings for roles. She could have walked into $155,000 tomorrow. That was the market rate for Melissa, who was doing every single day the exact same job for $40,000 less. And I want to tell you what happened in the moment she saw that number clearly for the first time, because this is the moment that this episode is really about. Melissa told me something had shifted, not rage, not panic, although both came to her, something quieter, something kind of like a fog lifting. Because once you see the number, you can't unsee it. And once it stops being a feeling and now it becomes something that's in your screen, and you can't push down a fact. Something stops you from accepting it until you see it as a fact. And that's the moment that the real work of growth happens. So I'm going to share with you a career salary calculator I created for just this situation. So let's use someone other than Melissa so that we have a second scenario here. And we're going to put the 160 salary, and we're going to say senior director of marketing. We've seen this before. So at 160, a senior director of marketing, and I didn't put the city here, but what I'm doing is I'm putting what that next level role would look like. And this is no guarantee, but this is an estimate based on market data. And this AI prompt goes out to check that out. And so senior director of marketing, next step would be VP of marketing. And that's a 34% increase from 160 to 215. And this aligns with helping a woman advance herself, moving into more of an executive role. And you may be saying, I'm not into my executive role. Well, how about the 115 to 155 with Melissa that I talked about earlier? I just wanted to give you another scenario because the current path at 160, getting 3% annual increases, cost of living, inflation, gives you a total 10-year earnings of $1.8 million. And if you go to the 215 and you get that same 3%, which, by the way, 3% of 215 is more than 3% of 160, but you knew that. Your total earnings for that same 10-year period are $2,464,000, a $575,000 increase. Most people would find that pretty convenient to have in their retirement account, bank account, to pay off or down the mortgage, to find a nice vacation every year to go to without feeling stretched and strained, to reduce or eliminate your debt. So these are the things that our clients start really seeing. And I'm going to say it this way. The seeing of the numbers really puts it in perspective. And perhaps just now you've seen maybe a salary that's somewhat of your number. You know, the thing about doing the math is that it gets louder because I think most women never actually do this. They don't look at a 10-year out projection. They're just thinking about today and managing and juggling all the things today. And it's super easy for us to settle, and your leadership knows it. She'll never go anywhere. She's perfectly happy and she's pretty good here. There's no risk of her leaving. And that's probably true. But why would you wait another day, month, week, whatever, to have either the conversation or to truly get things together so that you can advance, whether that be a promotion or get yourself on the job market, see what's out there. So you're talking about settling for $40,000 less a year and not carving out the time to do the work, to get the strategy in place. And this is the next layer, because deep down, you're wondering if you really are capable of carrying that off. Deep down, you're wondering, am I really able to do a job making $40,000 more? And a lot of clients I've worked with, they're also looking at their family of origin and saying, well, I'm higher paid than my siblings or than my parents were, so how much do I really need? We find all sorts of ways to mitigate the subconscious feeling and the repressing of that gut of knowing you're underpaid. So again, with Melissa, it's $40,000 a year, and not doing any escalator math on her, $400,000 over 10 years, $800,000 over 20 years, gone. not spent, not invested, not saved, just left on the table because the conversation never happened. The new job organization and going after something better and more for your future, for your family, for your own financial health and freedom never happened. Every time you take a new job, you have the opportunity to make that leap. But usually, a woman taking a new job, the first question is some version of, what are you currently making? And by the way, that is technically an illegal question in some states and cities around the country because it has been shown to be one of the reasons why women have less earnings. Women will answer that question honestly. Male colleagues might buff it up a little bit. And that has nothing to do with what your value and your worth is in the new job. By the way, it doesn't equal. Your current earnings don't equal what that new job is worth and the value you bring. So the offer is anchored in your current salary. Don't answer that question. Instead, say, that's an interesting question. In looking at the job that I'm interviewing for and what I bring to the table, this role is really something more like $160,000, $165,000 a year. You have to be able to say the words and let it roll off your tongue and get that number higher than what you're willing to accept. So if you say 160, 165, you're sounding pretty comfortable with that number. And that now becomes the anchor. Oh, that's above the pay range. Interesting. So you're not looking with someone from my experience? You can do this. With a bit of coaching, you can do this. So your number becomes the floor. You see how that is? If you give them your current salary, that becomes the floor. So now they're anchored in 115 and you got to go up from there. When you say 160, 165, now they have to negotiate from there. I've had clients pay thousands and thousands of dollars for this negotiating tips and tricks. So please understand what I'm saying. That $40,000 gap does not get to translate into how they pay you on the next, because that compounds a problem. And it travels with you. You need to be traveling with that leap, $40,000, $45,000, $50,000 leap. You're in a subconscious pattern of agreeing to that invisible ceiling every time you walk into your room, a meeting, a Zoom room, commuting to and from your job. You are literally knowing that you are living in a ceiling that isn't even above your head. It's like below your head. You're crunching yourself down to fit. And when women in my coaching community talk about leaving $1 million on the table, they're not being dramatic. They're being mathematically accurate. And for my clients, women earning between 100 and 150, they're typically underpaid between $20,000 and $40,000 or more a year. This is not hypothetical. Over 2,000 women, over 12 years, over and over again. Probably out of those 2,000 women, maybe there was like 3 women I would have said got a pretty nice pay package for where they were at and what they were doing. Out of 2,000. Most of them had a real significant number that was hurting them and that was eating away at their lifestyle and their happiness. And when you're accepting something less, you're not feeling good about yourself. And even though you may not be thinking consciously about that, you know it. And this pay gap is a wealth gap, and it has your name on it. And I want to add one more layer to this because I don't think we talk about this enough. The salary doesn't just determine what you take home every 2 weeks. It determines what you're able to put away for the future. If Melissa is earning $40,000 less than the market rate, she's also contributing less to her 401k and or taking less home, which means her employer match, if she has one, is calculated at a much smaller base, which means the compounding growth inside that retirement account is starting from a lower number every year. So that's another layer of what you're missing out on. And many employers are matching at least 1% of your contribution. And that pay gap does not just stay there. It erodes what is in the retirement account earning interest. It reaches into your retirement. So if you're 45 right now, That pay gap that you have is decreasing your retirement future savings. Not only the take home pay, but that account. I mean, just think about all those layers. It's reaching into your financial security 20, 30 years from now. And it's choices that you will or will not have when you're 65 or more. This is not abstract. This is not a what if scenario. This is your future, and it's being quietly, consistently underfunded. Not because you didn't work hard enough, not because you didn't deserve it, but because the conversation got delayed, postponed. You hid from it because it felt too risky. The gap stayed a feeling instead of a fact. You have to turn it into a fact. Today, right now, I say enough already. Your pay gap is not a feeling. It is a fact. You can look at all the data, and it's true across all professional women. It's not just you, but you are the one who has to solve that for you. And so we got to name it. So what happened after Melissa ran her numbers? I want to be honest with you about this because it was not a straight line. The first thing that happened was grief, real grief. Because when you calculate what's already been lost, the years behind you, it's a loss. And there's a mourning on that because you've let yourself down. And there's a moment where the number stops being abstract and you start feeling that you've made big mistakes over the years. And most of the time, that is a big enough feeling that stops women from advancing their truth because they don't want to face that. This is where coaching is so helpful and so valuable because you're going to grieve. You're going to have a time period of mourning, and you're going to have to move through and overlay a strategy while you're also moving through the grief. And maybe it'll turn to anger, and you can't rush past it. You have to sit in it, name it, and work through it. And grief that is suppressed becomes the story that keeps you stuck. After the grief for Melissa came clarity. Melissa stopped asking herself whether she was worth 155. She had answered the question. And when we helped her put all of her achievements on a resume, she saw with her eyes, especially when we compared it to opportunities in jobs that were posted. Oh, now I see it. Now the gap of her impression of herself starts to close. And now she can come together in her full alignment. And that's when the strategy really takes off. We built the case with her. We documented her impact. We identified her number, and she practiced saying out loud until it stopped feeling like a reach and started feeling like the fact that it is. We talked about the anchor effect. We talked about the importance of not letting 115,000 become a starting point or in any conversation. We talked about how to respond if she was offered a title without the compensation. And when Melissa walked into that conversation, she was not asking a favor. She was correcting the record. That's what changes. When the gap stops being a feeling and becomes a fact, and you have the numbers and you begin to integrate your worth with that number, the energy in the room is different. The ask lands differently because she was not hoping they would agree with her assessment of the facts, which translated into her worth and her feeling. She knew it. She was simply informing them of it. And so I want to talk to you directly for your situation right now. And please do this work. Please understand and assess where your salary is relative to the experience level you bring to the table. And for extra credit, are you ready for that promotion that you've been putting off or scared of? Most women also are sitting on a job title and a rung on the ladder without a move forward because they fear that. I don't know if I could pull that off. It might be more work than I can do. So that's a double whammy. So if you're doing the math right now, and I know some of you know your number and the gap and all of that based on what the market is, city you live in, etc. So you're going to tell yourself that timing isn't right. The market is uncertain. I should wait until the next review cycle. You should be wanting to set the offer in a different frame and negotiate with your current leader, as well as see what the market is without assuming what it isn't. I had a client the other day on a coaching call tell me how bad the market was, the job market. I'm like, you're telling me what's going on? With all due respect, we're helping women look at the marketplace. There are jobs out there. There are plenty of jobs. You have to have the right strategy to make yourself a viable and high top talent for the candidacy of that job. So you can't keep waiting, because every time you wait, every day you wait to make your move, you're eroding your sense of self. You're continuing to argue against your limitations, or argue for your limitations and against your higher next move. So if you believe your worth and you're no longer willing to accept a number that is wrong, the more that number starts feeling like the truth, the more the ask starts to feel normal. And if you don't live in that, it's going to feel like an overreach. You're going to start feeling greedy or guilty about asking for so much. So you got to face the facts. And it's not a fact about you. It's a fact of the marketplace. Please understand that the workplace is its own container. There are rules and ways that you succeed and get along and do the things. It's not a group of friends trying to accomplish and pull off a baby shower. It's a workplace where you have to act in certain ways that are according to how the rules are played in the workplace. If you bring your checkers to a chess game, you're not even in the game. If you bring your basketball to a football game, you're not even in the game. And most women don't understand that. They're like, well, if I work really hard and be really nice. No, if you work really hard and be really nice, they're going to keep walking over you. And you've been funding someone else's budget with your silence, with your patience, with your willingness to wait for the right moment. You're funding your company's budget. You might as well write a check for $40,000 a year and say, thank you, company, for employing me here. This is a moment for your deep reconciliation of yourself. And this is why I call this show Enough Already. We got to get more women rising, and you are ready for a rise. So after you run the numbers, all of them, the annual gap, the 5-year, the 10-year, the 20, the retirement impact, the anchor, the effect, full picture, because you cannot fight a number you've never faced, and you face it, and stops being a feeling and becomes a fact. There is not anger. This is clarity, and the clarity is where the work begins. You're going to move through some emotions, but you got to stay with the clarity and with the truth. Let me give you 3 things to do this week. Concrete, actionable. First, run your number. Go to LinkedIn Salary, go to Glassdoor, go to levels.fyi. If you are in tech or the relevant salary survey in your industry, look up that role, your level, your market, your years of experience. Find the range. Find the midpoint. Now subtract what you're currently making. And by the way, I'm going to insert a little tip here. You never say a range. Never. Never. So if Melissa wanted to be nice, she may have said between 145 and 155. No, you say a number. There's no range in negotiations. So you want to write that number down. You want to get real with your annual gap. You want to multiply it by 5, by 10, by 20. Look at it. Do not look away. That's the number that's at stake in the conversation you've been putting off. Anchor it. And then calculate your anchor. Think about your next job, your next negotiation. If you walk in at your current salary, and they anchor to that number, that is the ceiling that they're likely to anchor in. So you have to anchor your number, which means say it out loud several dozen times. Keep looking at the data. Keep looking at job opportunities. Get in the real game. Anchor your number. And do not let your current number be the ceiling. So the third thing, name the story you're telling yourself about why you haven't asked. Not the tactical reason. Oh, there's never a good time. My boss is always busy. No, the real one, the real deep why you haven't. It is likely a story. I don't want to seem greedy. I'm afraid that they'll say no. What if they get pissed off and then they fire me? Really? You're going to be awkward. I don't want to be awkward. some part of you is not fully sure of your worth or whether you can handle that. And if you're literally making $40,000 less for the same job, we're not talking about handling a bigger job. We're talking about you feeling worth being paid the right number for the job you have. I gave you a scenario also of a promotion where there's even more money at risk. So I'm not sure where you're at with your career, but I want you to write down that number. I want you to own the story, and then I want you to get right with yourself. I want you to get right with not the market, not the timing, not the budget cycle, the truth of your value and your worth right now, not someone else's budget. Because your story, your dysfunctional story, pardon me for that word, but that's what it is keeping their budget where it is. When you own your worth, you're now shaking things up, but you're also saying, I'm not going to let you walk all over me because it's costing you. This is costing you. So that story is something you have to shift. And so I want to close with the one thing to stop, the one thing to start, and the one thing to carry forward. So stop treating the pay gap as a feeling. It's a fact. It has a number. It has compounding costs, and it has your name on it. Every day it stays abstract is a day it stays unchallenged, and you can stay in your denial. Run the number, make it real, give it the weight it deserves, and here's one thing to start. This week, I want you to do what Melissa did. Sit down with one salary resource, just one. LinkedIn's a pretty good resource. And look up the market rate for your role. Not to build a case yet, just to know. Just to see the number clearly, because clarity is the beginning of everything. We have to face what the real number and the real situation is. And that's your truth to carry forward. The women who closed the gap are not the ones who got lucky or found a more generous manager or waited for the system to notice them. They're the women who ran the numbers, named the gap, did the soul work on their worthiness and moving through their grief and disappointment in themselves. And they corrected it. They had the conversation in that order, in that exact order. The gap is not your failure. It is a fact, and facts can change with a conversation. You're not the problem. You never were. I'll see you on the next episode.
If today's episode hit home, share it with a woman who needs to hear it. Because the best thing we can do is make sure no woman sits alone in an experience that has a name. You've been listening to enough already. I'm Coach Mo Fall. Please subscribe and like and comment so this can be sent to more women just like you who needs to hear there is a different way. Take good care.